Hello everyone, welcome to IMPRINT IS and I'm Varun Kular and today we're looking at the news of 28th November 2018, right? Okay, let's start. So what all we'll be covering today, we'll be looking at the ease of doing business ranking and the fact that corruption perception in India is reducing. The RBI saga will be continued. We'll talk about what was the result of the meeting that happened yesterday. We'll look at India and the WTO. We look at migration as a topic, right? And there's an article there on migration. Then we look at remission in sentences and judicial review. The Maratha quotas, there are a couple of articles on that, and there are a few articles on the India Maldives relations, and there's an article on India Pacific as well. We look at Posco Act and the fact that the compensation has not been paid on this, and a couple of miscellaneous editorials, right? Okay, so let's start. So, this article says corruption is no longer the top three hurdles to doing business in India. Okay, so very interestingly, this has happened. So, idea is that corruption perception among UK businesses was that India was a very corrupt area, right? So, UK India Business Council Ease of Doing Business report said that the corruption, at least has come down, and this has happened because of these things, right? And that is the Aadhaar e-submission of documents, right? Then we have e-signatures, online tax filing have brought down the face-to-face interaction. And whenever the corruption comes, we always have this case that because of there is a face-to-face interaction, there is a chance of corruption, right? But there's certain issues are still there, right? Taxation issues, right? And price points have overtaken as the major barrier, right? And has been identified by 36% in taxation issues and 29% in case of business respondents, right? So this is, I think, an idea that maybe the GST has not really kicked in, and I think this will get better across the next few years or so, right? So this was the idea that so this is a very good news that corruption has actually the perception of corruption in India has gone down, especially by UK businesses. Okay, then what typically is Narendra Modi's thought process towards this? He says that his government was working towards doubling the size of the Indian economy to 5 trillion as soon as possible and placing India among the top 50 countries in the ease of doing business ranking. So please note this. This is important. This can be used in your essay, in economics questions, etc. So if you're writing a question on this, so definitely this should happen. Then what I think has been the biggest achievement this year across the last few months has been this. The country has seen a 180-degree in change in the last 4 years, with India moving 65 notches up to 77 in the ease of doing massive, business ranking. And this is a very, very massive record, right? So this is very, very important. I think the Modi government twin focus, policy driven governance, and predictability in policies has led to this, right? So this is very important. And also, the government has abolished over 1,400 laws, right? And it has reduced the time to resolve commercial disputes to 400 days. So this again also something I think you should note in your notes. Okay, so how is ease of doing business measured? So obviously, there has to be obviously starting a business. So what kind of labor market regulations there? What time do you get the construction permit? The time for getting electricity, the time for registering property, getting credit. So protecting minority investors. So this has happened as well because of the insolvency and bankruptcy code. Then trading across borders, paying taxes, with how easy it is. Enforcing contracts still a problem in India, I would say, but has gone better. Then resolving insolvency again by the IBC code has done better. So I think this is the kind of diagram that I think you should draw in your answer, right? On ease of doing business. Yes, this question is definitely expected on ease of doing business because there has been a very, very sudden decrease in it. Okay, so just to have an idea how it has been working out. So dealing with construction permits, this has seen the great fall, like 181 to 52, right? Starting a business, really not that great, I would say, but still a drop of 19 points. Enforcing contracts, this has remained the biggest problem of India. The judiciary is very, very slow, and something needs to be done for this. So this is something of a area that definitely, I think, in the end of your answer, you should write. Then trading across borders definitely has worked well because of the GST. Getting credit not really working, and I think the RBI meeting was mainly on this itself. Then getting electricity connection, again a problem. But if you think about the problems that we're facing, resolving insolvency, I think these two things and protecting minority investors, this is not doing a great. This protecting minority investors, even the government is not doing a great job. In take the example of ONGC and the HPCL. The ONGC took, bought HPCL by taking debt which was not in interest of the minority investors of that. Okay, paying taxes not really becoming easy, but we're having more and more e-filing. Registering property not that great as well. So definitely this is something we have to focus on. But think about it that from 2014 we've nearly halved our rank. So that's a great step. I think this is also a graph I think you can make in your answer, and that would really fetch you marks, right? If a question comes on ease of doing business question. Okay, then RBI and the government. So what typically happens in this? So first thing is that what does the center want from the RBI? It says that align the capital norms to Basel level. If you say that 28% is the the kind of capital norms that you've kept, and this should be reduced, and basically the sum should be basically transferred to the government. Now the RBI government meets says that there's no change in Basel norms, and the deadline has been pushed back. But what they have done is they have put a committee, and they say that the committee will say that uh, now what will happen is the next year whatever excess financial things, future earnings are supposed to be earned, right? Those. So the most contentious issue between the central bank and the finance ministry was RBI capital. Now, while the RBI has agreed to set up a committee on economic capital framework, its mandate is restricted to future earnings and not the existing reserves, right? So this is something I think you should definitely add in your notes today, right? Then the other thing, right? The special liquidity window for the NBFCs has been left undecided, right? So this is something that is still a problem for us, right? Then on the PCA, the board for financial supervision of the RBI will review the norms and take a call in some parameters like NPA, which could be relaxed so that some of the banks could come out of the PCA, right? And the 11 public sector banks were on the PCA, and this basically has led to very weak credit for the MSMEs, right? So this was one of the big issues, right? Relaxation of the prompt corrective action framework on the 11 PSBs, right? Remember, the MSMEs sector has been hit, right, by twin blows of demonetization GST. So this is something that is definitely there, right? So basically, if you think about it, it's the government which has caused this problem with the RBI, right? So GST and demonetization, they're still creating a problem for us. Then debt for recast for MSME borrowers with loans up to restructuring will be done for 25 crores around, right? Debt. So that's the basic idea. These are the major things that have come, right? So I think I think you should take up, definitely note down these things from this article. Okay, and obviously the issues left undecided. Okay, these are the other articles. I think this is from the Indian Express, the previous one from the Hindu. Pretty much they say the same thing, right? All of them. So that's not a problem. Uh, and this is the article in your notes, which I think you should just cut this article from the newspaper today and just uh, add it here. Okay. Then the WTO. The next topic is WTO, and the Union Commerce Minister Suresh Prabhu said that WTO organization has changed for the better, and has to change for the better, and we must need because global trade must kept intact. The problem is that WTO relevance is now under question as some countries are taking unilateral measures and which are impacting global trade. So this is the main thing, right? The USA basically is taking unilateral measures, and that's a big problem. And Prabhu said the agenda is being prepared that all nations, including substantive issues, should be there. Right? Remember the main issue with India and the WTO always has been agriculture subsidies, vis-a-vis the developing countries was investment. So that has been the basic. One side wants investment to be liberalized, other side wants agriculture subsidies to be maintained. Right? So this was the idea. So let's look at what's the problem with the WTO. So this is a question that can come in your mains. So I think this is something I think you definitely should note and maybe write an answer to as well. So WTO is facing existential crisis. WTO has been considerably weakened as there has been a huge growth in bilateral treaties. So this is something that has happened among nations, and also the mega trade deals like the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the RCEP involving 16 countries. Okay, so let's look at how does the WTO work. So there's 7 judges on the appellate body of the WTO that decides on trade disputes, right? And at least 3 judges are required to take a decision. But USA has blocked the appointment of new judges to replace their retiring ones. And by the end of the year, the body will be left with less than 3 judges, which may stop its functioning. And as you know, Donald Trump has this focus on America first. So what he's indirectly doing is dismantling the working of WTO, and will have long-term effects on global trade. Okay, now the other issues which are happening is obviously without America first, right? There's a trade war between US and China, and this negates the core non-discriminatory principle of WTO. This is something that you should understand, that the WTO basically means that everybody should be free to trade at at maybe low tariffs or actually no tariffs. So US and China have imposed counterproductive duties, accusing each other of harming their domestic interests. Remember yesterday we talked about the fact that now I think we can export soya to China. Whatever the tariff they're putting on each other, I think India can definitely take advantage of that, right? Okay, and now China also wants, I think, a permanent seat in the WTO because of this. Inability of WTO to bring together developed and developing nations to a consensus on Doha agenda is another problem, right? I think we'll have to do another video on WTO and the Doha agenda, definitely. I think when we have the next meeting of the WTO, we'll definitely do that. Then reinvigorating trade and inclusive growth about WTO reforms, getting rid of consensus-based system, allowing new issues to be raised. This is something that needs to be done. And besides, diluting the principle of special and differential treatment is something, and the most favored nation concept. These things should be done, right? So global rule making will now face serious challenges if countries take action that leads to loss of trust, and especially in having a constructive dialogue. So now, what should in the end of the answer, you should talk about the fact that if WTO fails to reform itself and break down, big players than EU, China, and Japan will rule the roost without legal restraint, and smaller countries will resort to protectionism, which will reduce the volume of their trade and income. Right. So the idea should be that WTO should maintain, and there should be a very strict stance taken by them. The question is, but who will build the cat? And that's something a big problem, and the cat being USA in this case. Okay, so what should be the way forward? So a general focus should be on the improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the existing frameworks of the WTO, right? Safeguarding the dispute settlement systems, updating trade rules, regulation to ensure WTO relevance for modern trade issues, then expanding the appellate body from 7 to 9 judges, increasing the number of judges, definitely. Then there should be a need for a structural reform of WTO functioning as a multilateral trading system, right? Remember, despite WTO being a democratic organization, there's need to make it more effective in the interest of small countries against stronger countries. The process of retaliation is ineffective and too impractical for smaller players, and the big countries can easily do this, right? Also, India needs to get all the countries on board, right, and return on issues such as tariffs, industrial tariffs, that is agriculture and services, right? And India needs to basically forge a larger alliance to counter moves that are against its interests. So this is something that definitely we need to do, and this I think we need the support of the African and the other South based South cooperation basically. Okay, now very interesting thing that has happened. So we basically, when we had GST, we had something called the National Anti-Profiteering Authority, and this has found hard cash private limited, basically that is not McDonald's, not passing rate cut benefits of 7.9 crores to the consumers and the GST. And this is very, very mean of them, right? And definitely, right, I think all of you go to McDonald's as well. So 18% tax was reduced to 5%, and McDonald's didn't do so, right? And this was done from November 5, 15, 2017. So this wasn't done. Okay, so this was there was another thing on on Fab India, right? That it has not passed the reduction of benefit on rate of two items that is bathing bar and instant drink powder, right? But that was basically said that no, that didn't happen. Okay, so let's look at what kind of question can come. I think the question which will come up is will be on this, the NAA, right? So National Anti-Profiteering Authority has been constituted under Section 171 of the Central Goods and Services Tax Act 2017, read with the Chapter 15 of the Central Goods and Services Tax Rules 1917, 2017, that is, to determine whether reduction in tax or benefit of input tax rate is being passed on to the recipient by the way of a contemporary reduction in taxes. So this is very, very important. And the idea is that was very, very important, and this was shown that this the benefit of input tax credit and reduced GST rates would flow to the consumer. And the Modi government actually had put a lot of advertisements when this happened as well, right, for popularizing this. And this article definitely says that yes, this is working out for us. That yes, people are alert to this NAA. Okay, so let's look at the next article, and this is a very interesting article, and it is by G. Anantakrishnan, and he says India must reinvent toilets and omni-processor waste treatment plants to scale up, sanitation. Now, this is a very interesting article. So, in this film, the article starts with Microsoft founder Bill Gates says when he displayed a glass beaker with human feces on stage at a sanitation conference in Beijing recently. He was praised by World Bank President Jim Yong Kim for making poop cool. Okay, I think maybe we'll all laugh at it, but what he did was basically he made sanitation innovation cool, right? And he basically made sure that that children could be saved in developing countries from crippling consequences of stunting, right? And in many places children play amidst faces in the open and contract diseases which result to malnutrition and stunting, and this has actually been seen in India as well, right? So this is something that definitely even in India being supposed to focus on. So the article talks about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the BMGF, that it has devoted 200 million to incubate new technologies that will rapidly scale up sanitation. It has announced that there will be a further 200 billion investment to achieve this. And according to WTO and the UNICEF, that is, 22.2% of children, or 155 million, under according to UNICEF, 22.2% of children, or 151 million, under 5 years are stunted globally in 2017. Right. So the World Bank says that annual healthcare costs from lack of sanitation in developing countries are staggering 260 billion. So that tells you that this is something which is there. But the challenge obviously is to decentralize sanitation, right? And the idea is that the kind of sanitation that we have right now, only governments and large corporations can afford, right? And fast expanding cities cannot have massive sewage treatment plants. So what they basically need is standalone processors which will help communities and the individual. Okay, so that is the basic idea, that something like that has to happen, and that is what they're funding, and that is just right. And so what in this article also talks about, right, is talks about the fact that what does India, highlights up. So if you think about India, India is recording treating urban sewage is poor at 30%, and a third of the 847 large sewage treatment plants are not functional, according to the Bill Gates and Melinda Foundation. A priority should be made to put these plants to full use, right? Though political leaders have been, aware about this, Prime Minister Modi's Swachh Bharat mission has brought the fecal sludge treatment within the ambit, and many chief ministers now want the FSTPs, but the orders only are 415, and these are very minority, right? If actually this technology can be used. So I think this is something that something which you all adopt definitely. Please go through this article. They're actually talking about the different new kind of toilets and sanitation system that they have, right? But this, I think, this can actually go in your if there is essay, or let's say on sanitation for all. So please cut this article for the essay portion. Okay, then we have the general studies too paper, and this is the first question which I actually was talking about, is the fact that discuss the changes in the trends of labor migration within and outside India in the last 4 decades. So this was the question. Okay, so let's look at the article first. Literacy levels in rural India suffer from migration of families. And UNESCO report says that 80% of seasonal migrant children in 7 cities lacked access to education and were 40% likely to end up in work. So what it says is because of migration, there might be child labor. Okay, so it says in India, 10.7 million children aged 6 to 14 lived in rural households with a seasonal migrant in 2013. About 28% of youth aged between 15 to 19 in these households were illiterate or has not completed primary school, compared to the overall 18%. So basically, if your father is a migrant, what will happen is that you'll have less access to education, right, and are likely to end up in work rather than in education. And this is very interesting. So the report says the construction sector absorbs the majority of them. The survey says in Punjab, 3,000 brick kiln workers are there, and they were found to be interstate migrants. And 60 to 65% of the children, right, 60 to 80%, 5 to 14 aged applicants work there 9 to 5 7 to 9 hours. I better tell my all my DC friends about this, and this is something that needs to be done about it. Okay, about 77% of kiln workers reported a lack of access to early childhood or primary education for their children, right? So this is a big problem that, can we actually create a scheme for all these brick kiln workers? That's something, right? The problem is that most of them are migrants, so they have very, very little say, right, to the people, to the authority, that is. But what has happened? Let's look at how this issue can be resolved. Obviously, there's the Right to Education Act in 2009, which has made mandatory for local authorities to admit migrant children. National level guidelines were issued, also allowing for flexible admission of children. Right, providing transport and volunteers to support with mobile education, creating seasonal hostels. So we have Gujarat, which provides seasonal boarding, right? We have NGOs which also collaborate with it. Tamil Nadu provides obviously textbook in language other than Tamil. So this is again something which we talked about in our post-independence thing. Then Maharashtra again has enrolled volunteers to provide after school psycho-social support to children left behind by migrating parents. Then Odisha definitely again has taken the responsibility of seasonal hostels run by the NGOs. So idea should be that these migrants need to be also be taken. Remember the Indians also. So this is something that definitely is there, right? And a pilot program also was done in Rajasthan to track the progress of out of school children, but it did not do any learning, right? Because obviously there are major barriers between them and the kiln workers. The teachers says that student absenteeism were rampant, and that's still a big, big problem, right? Okay, then we have another polity question, which is a very, very famous polity question. And the question was, instances of president delay in commuting death sentences has come under public debate as excess as denial of justice. Should there be a time limit specified for the president to accept or reject such petitions? Analyze. So this is the question I would actually pose to you, right? Based on this article. So, what this article says is the reason mooted by the Tamil Nadu government to recommend the remission of three convicts are not beyond judicial review. And in the past, the courts have held that wide constitutional power of the executive to remit the sentences of life convicts has been inconsistently right upheld with Supreme Court. But release of prisoners should not be based on irrelevant reasons like religion, caste, color, or political loyalty, right? And the fact that governor had earlier sent back the recommendation should be taken into account. Okay, so constitutional power to remit sentences there has been preserved by the Supreme Court in the Maru Ram judgment that the exercise of remission of powers is not behind judicial review if it has been done to exercise for irrelevant consideration of political ends. And Supreme Court has said the order of release should be vulnerable, right? Judicial review. Okay, but legal experts say the convicts can seek remission as long as they have served 15, right, 14 years of sentence, right? And section 433 says that in the IPC, right? The idea is that the five-judge bench of the Supreme Court in the Maruram judgment note that a brutal murder, right, brutal murderer, bloodthirsty in his massacre, has been sentenced by a court with wrong observation about his bestiality. It may be arrogant or irrelevant use of abuse of power to remit his entire life sentence the very next day after the conviction, merely because he has joined the power party in power or is close to a relation of a political hierarchy. He says that Maruram in judgment observes that an order of remission does not wipe out the offense and it does not wipe out the conviction. So that is there. Okay, so this is something that definitely I think you should go into this article and also mention the other articles. Advocate Yogesh Khanna confirmed there was no riders from Supreme Court where death penalty was reviewed in March 2016 and commuted to life sentence by Ranjan Gogoi, right? They can have remission, right? That is the idea. Okay, so again, this is something I think you should study in polity in detail. Okay, right, and you should talk about this. Okay, right. Please try to write this answer, and I'll actually give you a solution also of this in detail, right? Okay, so let's look at the case in detail again. So Supreme Court in Puru Sudhakar case has given a small window for judicial review for the pardon powers of the president and the governor for the purpose of ruling out any arbitrariness. The court has earlier held that the court has retained power of judicial review even on the matter which has been vested by the constitution solely on the executive. Maybe this is judicial encroachment, but still it's fine, I think. Article 72 of the Constitution empowers the President to grant pardons to the persons who have been tried or convicted in any offence in the cases where the obviously punishment or sentence is enough for an offence against a union law, or is obviously in a military court, or it's a sentence of death. And remember, the pardoning power of the president is independent of judiciary. It's an executive power, and he does not sit as a court of appeal, right? It basically is twofold. The idea is just to look at if there's correcting any judicial errors or in the operation of law, maybe some new evidence has come to light, or to afford relief for a sentence which president regards as unduly harsh. Remember, when you are actually pardoned or something, or there's some remission, it does not say that you're actually now uh, free of the conviction. You're only free of the sentence. Remember that. Okay, so pardoning power obviously includes the five terms, that is pardon, commutation, remission, and respite. So what does that mean? The pardon basically removes sentence and the conviction completely. It absorbs the conflict from all the sentences, punishments, and disqualifications. And that is what pardoning means. Commutation basically substitutes one form of punishment into a lighter form. That is, a death sentence may be computed to a rigorous imprisonment, which might be computed to a simple imprisonment. Remission implies reducing the period of sentence, right, from, let's say, without changing its character, like rigorous imprisonment for 2 years may be reduced to rigorous imprisonment for 1 year, right? And that typically what has happened in this case. Then respite, it denotes awarding a lesser sentence in place of original one, right? Physical disability or pregnancy of a woman offender can be taken care of in this. Then reprieve, obviously, it implies stay of the execution of sentence for a temporary period to enable the president to have time to pardon or commutate the sentence. Okay. Governor also has a similar power, right? Governor can also grant, but he cannot actually, pardon sentences inflicted by court martial. He cannot pardon death sentences, right? So because it's a power to pardon, and that only lies with the president, not the governor. So this, I think, is extremely important to remember. This can be used in any kind of prelim question here. Okay. Uh, governor can suspend, remit, or commute a death sentence. He cannot pardon, but he can suspend, remit, or commute a death sentence definitely, right? But so in terms of a suspension, remission, or commutation of death sentence, they have equal powers, but not pardoning powers. Okay, and these are the three questions I would like you to try, and you can actually send your answer to our Telegram group in case you see this video and want to try the answers. We'll correct it and send it back to you. Okay, let's look at the next thing, that is the Maratha quota, right? So, what is the demand, the decision, and challenges ahead in its implementation? Okay, now the first problem is, who are the Marathas? Marathas are Marathi-speaking politically dominant community in Maharashtra. They make up of 1/3 of the population of the state. that have been identified as a warrior class and have large land holdings. Since the formation of Maharashtra in 1960, 11 of its 18 chief ministers have been from the Maratha community, and but the division of land and agrarian problems of the years have led to declining prosperity, especially among the middle class and lower middle class Marathas. But they have a very important role in the rural economy. So when was the decision taken? It was taken by the Maharashtra State Backward Class Commission. It is headed by Justice G.M. Gaikwad, and he submits a 1,000 report that Maratha community is socially, economically, and educationally backward. I would really like to see this report. Right. Okay. Uh, the the Maharashtra, obviously backward class commission, studied 45,000 families from two villages from each of the 355 talukas, which have more than 50% Maratha population, and found that 37% of Marathas are living below poverty line. Right. So again, this is something of a big shock to me, but okay, I'll take it. And 62.78% of are small and marginal land holdings. 70% live in kacha houses compared to other communities, right? So what is the quantum? The quantum of reservation is 16%. So right, uh, but the government has not decided till now. Uh, Now the problem is the present total reservation in the state is 52%, and the OBC, the ST and SCs, and the rest being from the special backward class, as a Dangar, Banjari, nomadic tribe status, and it is actually even itself above than 50%. So the problem is that this again will lead to another problem, that the 50% gap, that the Supreme Court had already held the 50% gap here, right? And Devendra Fadnavis says that there's no such provision of a ceiling in the constitution of the court, right? So he says that Tamil Nadu is definitely there, right? And that is 69%. Okay, but remember, this happened much once before, and again, this is again happening, right? So this is a huge problem, right? Um, Now, what about the other political parties, right? Now, the idea is that the other communities will definitely say that this is a problem, right? Okay. So, what is the real problem? Why is there is a demand by dominant caste by this? So remember the fact that the Jats in Haryana, the Patels in Gujarat, the Kapus, right, in Andhra Pradesh, also seem to believe that reservation offers a redress to the crisis confronting them. They are agrarian communities hit by rural distress, especially in agriculture, and their bid to seek educational alternative plan have been stand by locational advantage. And quotas basically solve in the short term this problem, right? So the idea that the leadership of these communities see reservation as the safety net that can address this concern. So basically what has happened is the reservation has become the solution to all problems, right? Any kind of economic issue has led to this happening. Okay, so this again is a huge problem. And there are two editorials on this. I think you should read both of them, right? Definitely. But pretty much they say the same problem. That why is this happening? The idea is the same, that there's a perception about the relative inability to move up the economic ladder in these dominant castes. There's a lack of adequate there's a lack of adequate employment opportunities, a sluggish agrarian economy, right? These forward castes are a predominant agrarian class. So basically, the idea is that instead of looking at other solutions, these are really a short-term solution to the problem. Okay, so the question remains: will reservations, giving these reservations to these castes, solve the problem? Right. The fact is that both petitioners as well as the government seem to think that quota is an easy way out of the there's no easy solution to the rural distress that we are facing. So the government will have to expand the economic cake and create fresh opportunities so that people, especially young people who leave agriculture, are absorbed in non-farm sector. There is a churn in rural economy and old social hierarchies are being challenged. The restiveness of the peasant community agitating for quotas also seem to stem from the fear of losing privilege and the inability to engage imaginatively with change. The reservation debate has only helped to mask these issues. And the real problem remains, despite the fact, even if you give the quota to the Marathas, though it's obviously a dominant caste asking for a quota is something, it can't be really accepted by the court in the light of all the justice that needs to be prevail in that country. right? So this is definitely something, the rural distress or the agrarian distress cannot be solved by quotas, right? So this needs skilling India and providing jobs, good formal jobs to Indians. Okay, so Maldives next is on international relations, and Maldives is set to pull out of the China FTA, and the reason is obviously the trade imbalance is too huge, right? Between January and August this year, Maldives imports from China were 342 million, while its exports were just 2 million. So this is right, too huge, I would say. Yeah, so this is a huge problem, I would say. Uh, Jameen claimed that FTA initially would, administration, right, would diversify the 3.9 billion economy and boost fisheries exposure on Maldives, right? But this really isn't happening, and now obviously it's so huge that this really can't work out for, Maldives. Then we have the next editorial on, Maldives is from the Hindu, right? There has been a question which has come in about in Maldives issues in 2013, right? So what does it say? It says that after 5 years of rule by a government that was strong-armed political dissent domestically, the Maldives has put a pro-poor administration in swearing in Ibrahim Solih, and he's representing the Maldivian Democratic Party. He has announced a slew of populist, policies and woe to end the era of large-scale embezzlement and corruption. So this is something that is there, right? And obviously, what it says is that there's also a lot of corruption on mega construction projects, obviously, in the previous party. Now, remember, the Soleh government has come to power in a coalition with of the MDP has joined hands with Qasim, and the Islamic-based Adalat party also, and the support base of former, Mehmoon Abdul Goyum. So basically, there's a lot of ideological differences between them, and this can basically unravel of Abdullah Ramin again coming back. Okay, so basically, what happened is that there was a huge problem which has because this, if you think about the previous article, that is Maldives pulling out the China FTA. So the previous president flung the door to Chinese investment and allowed a cascading of financing that's called national jet to GDP, really ballooning to a quarter of GDP. So the strategic return to India and underlying democratic values could obviously backstop the economic pulmonary that Mali is sure to face once the traders start calling India dues. So this was a huge problem that I think we're facing. I think this is very, very positive for India. Indians are very, very happy about this because, right, Indians initially, India and Maldives have very, very close relation. It was one of our, very, very strong allies, I think, with just like in, Bhutan. So I think this is something definitely there. There was even a talk of, we're doing a 1987 type of a coup in Maldives when, uh, the other person, Abdullah Yamin, was there. But we didn't need to do that, so definitely is there. Okay, so let's continue. Then we have another article on India Pacific region. On the, please revise the India Pacific region from 16 November in case you don't remember. So this is an article by C. Raja Mohan, and he's talking about the Indo-Pacific region becoming important, and the China is basically pushing its influence in the Indo-Pacific, and obviously there's a resistance now from other rival powers, that is India, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and United States. So how that will basically focus. So that is what this article is. So please go through this as well. Then we have Anushna Jha, and she is a postgraduate student at the International Development and London School of Economics and Political Science, and she's talking about that our education lacks in basic fundamental values to respect women. Right, there are a lot of people who are very, very educated, very qualified men who have been named in the Me Too you know movement. So this is something that definitely needs to be looked into, right? And obviously, it basically what she says is that sexual misconduct or gender inequality is not a byproduct of lack of education, right? It is not on the education system, but there are other things, right? Obviously, education obviously has the basic duty of ensuring that we become socially aware and sensitive, who know how to interact and engage with people of different genders, castes, classes, and communities. Right? We must teach students that consent is essential of in any interaction, and even refusal should be respected. Okay, so this is something that needs to be going into. There needs to be a change in mindset. Efforts needs to bring up, obviously structural changes, and inequality or equality. The debate should not be limited to newsroom, right? And obviously stand up or themes of films. And these needs to go in schools, and these needs to be discussed in curriculums of college and schools. And there have to be anti-sexual harassment cells be established, and regular awareness programs should be done for this, right? So she has mentioned operation like Operation Nirbhik, right, which was initiated to start and promote the security of girls in school. So this is something again I think you can add in your essay, right? So again, this is something of a question which can again come in an essay. Okay, now we have Christopher Jaffelot, and he basically writes. I think this is one of my favorite editorials. Right, he writes beautifully. So he talks about uh, this article, no room for liberal doubt. He says India liberals who are torn by the dilemma because of the intricacies of Sabrimala affair uh, have actually forgotten a lot of things. Okay. The first, he says, reformers always had to face opposition when they stood against social religious traditions. Raja Rammohn Roy, the first Indian reformer of the modern era, or I think he's the father of modern India in some ways, right? Had to fight, and we'll actually do a series on him soon when we are able to get time. In Makers of Modern India, Raja Rammohn Roy is the first chapter in Ramchandra book. So he had to find conservatives for fighting Sati. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who fought for the widow remarriage, right, died a disappointed man, according to Surendranath Banerjee, who considered that even in 1925, the lot of Hindu women, Hindu widows, remain very much the same it was 50 years ago. And if you go to Vrindavan, I think you will understand this, what I'm saying. And later, Mahatma Gandhi had to put moral pressure on the members of his own family, his own ashram, to persuade them to fight untouchability. And a battle which he couldn't even take to its logical conclusion. Right? So, reformers are lonely figures, right? And the resilience of social conservatism on the expense of reformism can be seen all across. In examples, and he referred his special issues on studies in Indian politics. If you have time, go through it, but it's fine if you don't. But here, I think what you should definitely do is read about Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and Gandhi's fight against untouchability. Definitely. The other thing he says, there's certain issues which is very very strange about it. He says some liberals were uncertain about the right attitude in the Sabrimala case, assume that the people opposition is spontaneous. Okay, definitely it is not, right? And basically, he's given a lot of examples, right? He's So historically, one needs to distinguish between pure conservatives who believe in Sanatan Dharma, like Madan Mohan Malviya or Swami, right, Karpatraji, from traditionalists who defended the ancient practice in terms of identity politics, like Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Like, if you remember Bal Gangadhar Tilak, he typically defended the age of consent bill. He said that the Britishers should not, right, though every son of Aryavata should toil hard to see this custom eradicated. We would not like to have anything to do with the government to change any regulating of our social customs or way of living, right? Even a supposing act of the government will be a very beneficial or a suitable measure, right? He said that despite the fact the act of government or the judiciary is good, it should be done by the society itself. This custom should not be changed by an order of court, and that was Bal Gangadhar Tilak's view in the age of consent bill. Okay, but remember, Tilak would have been drawn in this, predicament also. But remember, he was in some ways, other ways, uh, in Kesari, talked about the fact why should we not able to convert religious festivals into political mass rallies, and obviously, Tilak basically started the national populism on the Indian public scene, which is happening right now in the Sabrimala case, right? He basically. The worship of Ganpati was spread from the family circles to the public square by him, right? So therefore, if you see all those movies and have seen a movie in which Salman Khan is striking a matki down right during Ganpati, that is basically started by Tilak, right? So remember, Sangh Parivar is actually learning from Tilak and applying the same technique here. So Sridharan Pillai basically said that Sabrimala is a golden opportunity. It's an issue, and setting the Sabrimala issue in a straight line is not possible. So we must put forward an agenda, and everyone else surrender to it leaving us and our only our enemies. So basically, what they have done is obviously they even have given advice to the priest against closing the Garbhagriha, right? Whether it will be contempt of court or it won't be, right? That has also been mentioned. So this is something very very sinister that they have done. Okay, and yeah, the BJP secretaries had gone to a decided temple and carried out what they would be successfully, right? They planned the whole process, and that has been mentioned in this article as well. That all the protest that is happening on Sabrimala is basically done by the BJP, and that's what he's saying, right? And he's given proofs. There's a video of Mr. Pillai as well, which is on social media in case you like to see, right? So what he says is the SC judgment cannot be implemented. If it cannot be implemented, it would be only a moral victory for the ethno-religious political enterprise at the expense of social reform, but also a defeat for rule of law. Okay, and this basically would be a signal to all the others, right? Who if you remember other countries when this these kind of judgments were not actually adhered to, what happened was Talibanization of Afghanistan, and if you look at what is happening in Pakistan, that can also happen to India. That's what the warning he gives, but obviously that's too far fetched. But definitely, the court has said that women should be able to now go to Sabrimala. That should be actually be accepted. Okay. Then we have the Posco compensation issue. That RTI data has basically said that while the protection of children from sexual offences, Posco rules 2012 says that there's eligibility for interim compensation to meet the intervened needs for relief and rehabilitation. They haven't done so, and in this article it says that actually we should make it mandatory, right? Okay, so that the Nirbhaya fund typically and they can be used for this, and budgetary provision should be made in the act itself to specify the Nirbhaya fund can be used for effective compensation. So that is the basic idea that this is something which needs to be done. But what actually we need to remember from this is this: the POSCO 2012, right? That we need to protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation, and this act basically should be advertised, right? On this, it has talked about the bill basically can be asked in a question in your society. No question has come on this till now, right? But there have been, if you think about, there have been so many cases of children being raped who are even less than 12 years of age, right? So it basically penalizes any person who has committed sexual harassment, sexual assault, penetrative sexual assault, and aggravated penetrative sexual assault, right? And a sexual harassment basically is, showing body parts to a child with sexual intent, showing pornography to a child, or even threaten to depict a child involving a sexual act through the media. So, and penalty is said to be 3 years and a fine. So, this is they have actually defined what does sexual harassment mean under the POSCO, right? Then, what does it mean sexual assault? Right, it is actually mentioned that he touches the vagina, penis, or anus of breast of a child with sexual intent without penetration. So, this is sexual assault. And if basically the child is between 16 to 18 years, it shall be considered whether consent has been taken against the child will or by deceit or threat. And there's obviously a penalty of 3 to 5 years and a threat. Then aggravated sexual assault obviously is similar to penetrative, and but the imprisonment is 5 to 7 years and a fine. Uh, Moreover, what is very interesting is that it has penalties for storage. The POSCO has to, penalties for storage of pornographic material and abetment of offences, right? So if you will help a friend who is actually doing this, that will also go against you. Then if he, so again, this is a big thing, I would say. Then we have offence committed on this act shall be reported to either the local police or the special juvenile police. So they have mentioned this, and who has to report to a special court. So there's a special court for this, and the police will have to take special arrangement for the care of child. And in case such a person fails to report a case, he shall be penalized, right? And the bill also includes penalties for false complaints. So this is also there, right? Each district shall designate a session court to be a special court. It shall be established by state government with in consultation with the chief justice. There shall be a prosecutor. These things have actually still yet to be done, right? And the trial should be completed in 1 year. And that's also been mentioned. And the guardian also can take assistance, right? So all these things have been mentioned. Right? I think you should write a question on the salient features of the POSCO Act today, right? After reading through this article. Okay. Then we have an article on GS1, and I think I've given a question on this as well, right? So in this case, David Hardman, right? He is a professor, right, of history and at the University of Warwick, and author of Gandhi in His Times and Ours, right? So Hardman talks about a different way to fight. So the question is, now we have attacks by terrorists. So does Mahatma Gandhi's legacy have anything to offer? But right. For Gandhi, Satyagraha was the only way to stop terrorism. And even in today's changed world and context, the Gandhian response is not to be taken lightly. So what does in this article say? Let's try to read this, because I think this is one of the most beautiful articles of today's newspaper. So he says that Gandhi himself was deeply concerned with the question on how non-violence could displace violence in political life. In his own days, he was faced with revolutionary nationalists who believed that imperial rule in India could be best fought through targeted violence against British officials and institutions. Gandhi was strong in condemnation of such a strategy, right? And this was basically seen when to his reaction of an assassination by an Indian student called Marilal Dhingra, of retired Indian civil servant Sir Curzon Vile, when he came to speak to a group of students in London in 1909. Vinayak Sarvakar, who was a friend of Dhingra, argued that he acted as a Hindu patriot. Gandhi was horrified by the killing. He stated that Dhingra acted in a cowardly manner, and that he had been egged, on by his ill-digested reading of worthless writing. Billy has gone as the guest of the Indian students, and he had been betrayed. If the British left India because of such act, murderers would become rulers. That's what Gandhi said. Gandhi sought to provide a different way to fight the British, obviously, namely through the Satyagraha. Right? He argued that if the established nationalist leaders failed to provide a non-violent outlet for the nationalist fervor of young Indians, they might be attracted to the violent means. So, in other words, his form of protest would from an outlet for the radicalized Indians to provide a protest, right? So that is the idea. So basically, Gandhi projected terrorism of the state as well as a counter, because he felt that the Britishers would also counter terrorism with terrorism, right? Uh, he said that the growing generation will not be satisfied with petitions, and Satyagraha is the only way, right? It seems to me to stop terrorism. And he wrote in the same year, that is 1919, if you do not provide the rising generation with an effective remedy, right, against the excess of authority, you will let loose the powers of vengeance, and violence will spread with a rapidity which will deplore, right, in offering the remedy of self-suffering, which is one meaning of a satyagraha, right? So I follow the spirit of civilization and present the young portion with the remedy which he will never despair. So he said, you might despair when you actually do violence, right? You might feel guilty when you after killing a person, despite the fact that it was righteous, right? But you might never do so in case this happens. Okay. So again, right? Uh, if you think about it, this article is one of the most beautiful articles. Please go through this, and I'll not continue it, right, explaining it, because I think we still. I think you should go through it yourself as well. If you have any doubts, please go. Do ask me, right, and we will discuss this, right. Okay, thank you so much, right, for being with us today, right, and let's stop here, right. Okay, right. Do write the answers to the three questions I have posted. Let me just show you the questions. Okay, so these are the three questions that I want you to write answers to, and you can actually email us at imprint.solution@gmail.com, or just post it on our Telegram group. Thank you so much.